Welcome to Research Recap on JP Morgan's Making Sense. My name is Kelly Wen, Head of Hong Kong and China Equity Sales at JP Morgan. Today, we're going to dive into the world of humanoid robots and how the growing robot industry, particularly in China, is transforming the future of automation. I'm joined today by Karen Lee, our Head of Hong Kong Equity Research and Asia Infrastructure, Industrials, and Transport Research, who has been taking a close look at some of the key developments in the humanoid robot industry in China and how it is poised to gain significant growth momentum, potentially mirroring the success seen in the new energy vehicle space. Karen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me here.
So Karen, let's start with some basics first. Could you give us a brief overview on, firstly, what do we mean when we say humanoid robotics? And secondly, why has this industry attracted so much investor interest recently?
Sure. So by definition, human robots will look human. So this is why this topic has been very sensational. People are thinking about human robots, which is going to walk into our family, speak to us, be our friends playing chess, be our teachers, and so on. In the near term, the human robots, however, may not exactly look like a human. Some of them are going to be, for example, like a dog or a human upper body, but with wheels below to facilitate the movements. What human robots are going to do, they are designed to mimic human actions and also interactions. However, the near term, in terms of the application cases, they are likely to be those which you are already familiar with in the factories as well as warehouses, replacing what we already have, such as cobots, which is also known as collaborated robots, as well as AGV, automated guided vehicles, and industrial trucks, industrial forklifts. All these are currently being deployed in factory, warehouses, logistic parks, and so on.
How about the demand side of things then? What are some of the primary demand drivers for humanoid robots? And how is that going to address the current labor challenges that many people are talking about?
Yeah, sure. So as mentioned, I think for the first 5 to 10 years from now, we do expect human robot to be more like working in factories, hospitals, like dangerous places which human beings wouldn't want to be. So we expect them to tackle the labor shortage, perform dangerous tasks, and enhance our productivity. Examples would be having the robots dealing with dull, boring jobs, which typical workers probably will find is too boring to do and being paid at minimum wages. Moving the box around in warehouses, another example. And then I think in later stage, of course, the demand drivers will become more compelling to us. Imagine in the world that you will have a robot for each one of us talking to us, and then potentially be our teachers, be our, for example, doctors, replacing a real person and in the service industry and so on. But that might be, say, like 10 years away. Also, there's definitely a lot of demand user case. Near term, medium term, longer term, we do expect to be a very different drivers for that. The curve, as mentioned, for the first 2 to 5 years, it will be more like significant strides in terms of factories, warehouses, but a longer term, it will be in our family, in schools, and so on, doing what human beings are doing, but a lot more interactive and make sure I think it will be more personalized experience.
Right. It does sound like they will be quite valuable for industries that are seeking to maybe optimize productivity and even safety, like you mentioned. You also mentioned just now a little bit about adoption curve, and maybe you can elaborate more on what that might be like, what the roadmap might be like, and to achieve, what do you think the size of the total addressable market might be for this industry?
Sure. The size of human robots, based on a few industry leaders such as Tesla and also Xpeng and so on, they're looking at a size of 5 to 10 billion human robots in the next 10 to 20 year time. That essentially means there will be one robot for each human being because the current population right now stands at around 8 billion. In terms of the demand case, we do expect to see a very rapid development. We are going to start with about 1,000 to be made by Tesla bots, but I think globally, including those made in China, we are likely to see 10,000 units as a starting point this year. And then from here, we expect to see a 10 times growth each year for the next few years. And then in 2030, we are likely to see a total of 200,000 unit robots being made globally. And that would translate into penetration rate of about 4%. So it's going to be a very rapid development in the first few years, as this is going to look like, I think, what a smartphone EV has gone through in the first few years of development.
Wow, 200,000 in 5 years. That's quite impressive. Now, why don't we look at China's role more specifically here? I'm sure you have seen the news. China hosted the world's first humanoid half marathon recently in Beijing. There are quite a number of Chinese companies developing some really impressive robots. Several EV companies also indicated that they will join the humanoid robot race as well. Can you talk about the key factors that position China as a leader in this field, and what might accelerate the humanoid robotic adoption and growth even further?
Indeed. So in the human robot space, we do see a potential competitive landscape similar to what is like today for the EV, where you see a number of Chinese leading companies competing against the American leading company for the top spots, but doing the process, the ability to drive down costs to make more user-friendly, and then advanced car models to help transform our experience could be, I think, the win-win situation. So what China is strong at, China is known as the world factory due to its vast manufacturing capability. It is very strong in a number of industries which are relevant to the development of human robots, including the factory automation. As mentioned, industrial robots is going to be initial user case for human robots, as well as EV, because the ability for the pilotless, the autonomous driving is also relevant in terms of helping the human robots move around. And then lastly but not least, mechanic industries, including the reducers, the bolt screws, the parts, and so on. These are what China is strong at, making the parts very cheap. That is very critical in the initial stage in terms of driving down the production costs to make the prices more compelling to speed up the adoption curve. On the other hand, what US is strong at, of course, is in terms of the innovation, particularly on the AI chips, LLM sensor side. That's indeed what I think in comparison, China is still weak at. So in the initial years, we do expect to see more like a collaboration. You're going to see some of the Chinese part makers to be working, for example, with Tesla. Some of the US-based human robot company might also be working closely with Chinese robotic company to make the product type turning into a real product.
Now, let's bring it all back to investor interest here, Karen. What is your outlook for investing in the humanoid robotics sector from here? And looking at the next 5 years or so, what would you foresee as the main challenges and opportunities?
Here today, we have a lot of conversations with institutional investors who are definitely taking a more serious interest in looking for investment ideas in this space as compared to the last 2 years. Human robot is not a new thing. In fact, actually, it was first talked about back in 2020s. But since beginning of this year, we definitely see more serious interest, both in terms of the secondary markets as well as the primary investments. So I think near term, from our side, what investors are looking for are the upstream or the part component makers, because I think it is likely to be an easier way to gain exposure because of the scalability in terms of the revenue growth potential, as well as, I think, more importantly, the potential profit accretion coming from this initiator. So I think there's mentioned also a robotic company currently listed in Hong Kong. That's definitely getting a lot of interest as well, because that is the only human robot Chinese company currently listed, called UB Tech. We currently don't cover. But on the other hand, there are a lot of other, I think, very interesting human robot company which is yet listed, is in the pipeline. Some of them might not be listed eventually, but they also get a lot of investor interest. And then, of course, as you know, some of these initiatives sitting in EV or home appliances company, they might eventually be spun off for separate listing. All these, I think, is going to happen, I think, over the next, say, like 5 to 10 years. But near term, in terms of exposure, the investors that we're speaking to are looking at the existing industrial company, the EV parts related company who are having the dialogue or even contracts with the customers for making human robots. And these are likely to be revenue and also profit accretive in the coming few years as a way to gain exposure.
Well, thanks for joining me today, Karen. This is certainly an area that we will be paying close attention to over the next few years. Lots of great points for us to take away and think about. And I look forward to seeing you at the JP Morgan Global China Summit, where we might be seeing some of these exciting humanoid robotics on stage as well. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to another episode of Research Recap.
Thanks for listening to Research Recap. If you've enjoyed this conversation, we hope you'll review, rate, and subscribe to JP Morgan's Making Sense to stay on top of the latest industry news and trends. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. This communication is provided for information purposes only. For more information, including important disclosures, please visit www.jpmorgan.com/research/disclosures. Copyright 2025 JP Morgan Chase & Company. All rights reserved.